Welcome to another episode of Single and Strong, the podcast that dives deep into the unique experiences of South Asian single parents raising their children in the face of cultural expectations, societal pressures, and personal challenges. I am your host, Shaili Gohil-Desai, for this special panel episode. Before we get into this episode, I wanted to let you know a little bit about me. I am a family lawyer based in London, specialising in divorce, finances, children, and modern family law, such as surrogacy and fertility. I am one of the newly appointed directors of Asian Single Parents Network, ASPN, an organisation which will provide you with social, emotional, and practical support to build confidence, prevent isolation, and combat stigma attached to being a single parent in the South Asian community. Now, I've been asked by the founder of ASPN, the very lovely Aruna Bansal, to chair today's panel discussion on all things divorce and separation, but from a South Asian perspective. Now, for our wonderful panel, we have Sarah Al-Jourani, a family solicitor from Irwin Mitchell Solicitors based in Sheffield. As well as having regular practice in all the usual areas of family law, Sarah specialises in Sharia law related matters and is a fluent Arabic speaker. Welcome, Sarah. Secondly, we have Sangeeta Kohli, also from Irwin Mitchell Solicitors, but she is based in Birmingham. She also works in all areas of family law, but has particular knowledge in honour-based crimes. Hi, Sangeeta. Lastly, we have Jodie Phelps, a financial advisor with 14 years of industry experience. She specialises in helping clients with key areas such as retirement planning, maximising wealth, and protection strategies. As a divorced mum herself, she understands firsthand the struggles of big life transitions. Before we get into the questions, I'd just like to take a quick moment to signpost a special feature of ASPN's offering, which is the Trusted Network. The Trusted Network is a directory of experts available for ASPN members. These experts provide advice and services to anyone going through a separation or divorce, but the magic here is that these experts have expertise or knowledge in the South Asian experience and are recommended by ASPN. Sarah and Jodie are listed in the Trusted Network, and maybe if I could take a quick moment to ask both of you why you think it's important to have such a directory and why you wanted to participate. So Sarah, perhaps you could go first.
Yes, thank you so much for having me on this panel today. I think for clients going through such a big life change via a divorce, a separation, a marriage, often they look for comfort from somebody who understands small religious or cultural nuances that might not play the biggest part in what's going on legally, but to them is the biggest part of everything that's going on in their lives. So having a directory of people they can trust and people who understand those small nuances, I think is a wonderful thing and makes a huge difference.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. And Jodie, how about you?
I think going through a divorce is so overwhelming and daunting, and you can feel really alone. You also hear a lot of things from other people who what may not be facts. So I think having people who are, qualified and working in this environment and understand the law is really important. It is really daunting, and to know that you're not alone is really powerful. So having a strong network whilst you're going through the process is very important. And the reason I like being part of that network is, like you said, I've been through it myself. I've had lots of clients who do that, and it's so easy to kind of spiral, but having people to lean on makes the process so much easier.
Absolutely. It's all about community and how we can help each other. Thank you both. So now we're going to get into the main questions. Sarah, I'll start with you. Please, could you provide a summary of the legal standing of Islamic divorces in the UK?
Well, generally speaking, Islamic marriages and divorces that take place in this jurisdiction in England and Wales are not legally recognised. So if you have an Islamic marriage or an Islamic divorce just here, it makes no difference to you legally. Where it does make a difference is if that Islamic divorce has taken place in a country that recognises it and the divorce process meets certain criteria that we have in law and the situation meets that criteria to be recognised. Unless that happens, the divorce itself here will just end the Islamic side, and you will still need to go through the civil process to end your legal marriage. So often clients are going through kind of two things at once. They're dealing with the whole of the civil process dealing with legally ending their marriage essentially in this jurisdiction, but also then dealing with the Islamic side, whether it's before, during, or after that civil process.
And when it comes to seeking financial provision, what common themes do you see for clients who come from an Islamic background?
From a Muslim perspective, there's kind of two main themes that I'm seeing with financial provisions. The first one is to do with the meher, or dowry, as some people refer to it, the gift given from a husband to a wife at the point of marriage. Now, oftentimes that's a large sum of money. It can be property, it can be a huge gift such as a vehicle. But when it becomes gold, and specifically family gold that's been passed down through generations, husbands get a lot of pressure from their family to get it back and to retain it. And wives get a lot of pressure from their family to make sure that they hold on to it because it's their right in some circumstances. So that's kind of one of the main things that they look at. The second point that comes up quite a lot, or theme, is clients wanting a Sharia-based financial provision. Now, Sharia law is not recognized in this jurisdiction, and the way that Sharia law divides finances upon divorce is very different to how the law in England and Wales does. So it's looking at how we can match the two together in a way that would allow the provisions to be accepted by the courts of England and Wales, while also meeting the client's objectives of having that Sharia-based financial settlement.
Thank you. And last question for you. What's the best piece of advice you would give someone who is seeking a divorce who is from an Islamic background?
I think the best piece of advice is to get advice, essentially. Knowledge is power, and making sure that you get advice at every step, really. So before you get married, should you enter into a prenup? Should it be a Sharia-based prenup so that you can avoid somewhat these kind of issues later on? Getting advice on the nikah agreement itself. Is this legally binding? Should it be? How do you best protect yourself and your assets? And if you've not taken any advice up to that point, when you're thinking about separation, taking advice there. A lot of Muslims will turn to the community for advice, and rightly so. They'll go to imams, they'll go to Islamic-based mediation. A lot of family members get involved culturally, and sometimes there can be misunderstanding, there can be misinterpretation of the law. So it's making sure that you know what your position is before you take any steps or you start to have those discussions.
Completely agree. Thanks, Sarah. Now, Sangeeta, I'll come to you. I want to ask you the same questions that I asked Sarah, but if you could answer it from a Hindu and a Sikh background. So the first one was, please can you provide a summary of the legal standing of Hindu divorces and Sikh divorces in the UK?
So the legal position is the same as what Sarah said, in the sense of any religious ceremonies are just that, a religious ceremony. You still have to have a legal ceremony in England and Wales for it to be a legal marriage. What we tend to find, though, with the Sikh and the Hindu weddings is that in most circumstances, those do tend to have the civil ceremony at the same time. So most people who tend to get married at the Gurdwara will do their civil registry at the same time, or they'll do the same at the Mandir. So we do tend to find that it's less of an issue as such in terms of whether there's a legal ceremony. It does tend to take place. There are circumstances where it doesn't, and then the same law applies there. But generally, most cases that we get, the civil ceremony has taken place as part of that religious ceremony.
Absolutely. And in terms of financial provision, again, same question. I mean, do you see any common themes when it comes to seeking financial provision for a client who comes from a Hindu or a Sikh background?
Yeah, so there's a lot of common themes that seem to crop up in cases where you've got families from a South Asian background. Gold is always an issue. It's one of those things that pretty much across all of the faiths, there's some gift of gold usually given. And from a moral perspective, people will think, well, that was gifted to me, and so that should be mine. And technically, legally, the law follows that way as well. If it's being gifted to you, it is yours. But that doesn't necessarily always align with what was expected at the time. So if it was gifted, as Sarah said previously, as a sort of family heirloom, people will want that to go back to their family in the instance of a divorce. And if people agree that between themselves, that's perfectly fine, and we can deal with that as part of any sort of financial settlement. The issue comes where there's disputes over it as to where it should go. And also the issue of where is the gold in the first place comes up quite often, because there's been more than one occasion where suddenly the gold has gone missing, or it can no longer be found where they said that it was. Sometimes it's in a different country, is what I had quite recently, or found under floorboards or something of that nature. So that in and of itself can become an issue, and the valuing of it as well, where trying to attribute a value to items of gold, if you haven't got receipts for it and things like that, you could have to go down the route of having to value it from photos from the wedding or videos or anything of that nature. So gold's always a thing. And secondly, I'd probably say issues of property ownership. We tend to find in South Asian families that you have multi-generational homes. You've got family members who are living together all the way from grandparents down to grandchildren, and that home may be owned by two individuals or one individual, but the beneficial ownership in that property is actually different based upon the contributions that people have made to it throughout the time of living there or when they bought it. And so you have issues where that can come up, and you might need to have people intervening in financial proceedings because of that.
Absolutely. And if you could give one piece of advice to someone who is going through a divorce, who is from a Hindu or Sikh background, what would that be?
I think similarly to what Sarah said previously, take advice. I think what I tend to find is families very much get involved in the first instance. There tends to be, every time I have someone from a South Asian background come and tell me about their divorce situation, there's been about 5 family meetings before then. And there's nothing wrong in doing so. There's absolutely nothing wrong, because it's a massive matter. And I got told before I got married that you're not just marrying your husband, you're marrying a family. And so I get that in the sense of wanting that familial support. But I think that when it comes to it and actually needing to finalise matters, you really do need to go down the route of having some legal advice to make sure it's finalised at the end, or ideally at the outset. If you know that there's issues of sort of property ownership, business ownership, having that dealt with right at the start in a prenup is probably the best way to go.
I agree. And as a lawyer myself, that makes so much sense to me. But there is such a stigma about going to a lawyer for advice before the marriage. And I think that's something that will hopefully change in time. Thanks, Sangeeta. Jodie, welcome. My first question for you is, in your experience, what common pitfalls, if any, have you seen when it comes to financial planning by clients who are from a South Asian background going through a divorce?
I think what I see more so is generally like the husband taking complete control of finances. I often find it where it's just not something the wife's been involved in, and they've never paid any attention. So my advice would always be, even if it's not your job, and sometimes it doesn't make sense to have 2 people doing one job, right? So there's always going to be one person who manages the money more. But I say to anybody, you never know what's around the corner, whether it's divorce or death or, something else. It's actually paying attention and understanding, making the effort to understand what's what will help a lot, because a lot of the starting point for me is like the basic actually understanding what is the pension, how does it work, and also that if, for example, the husband was the one who managed the pensions and sorted the funds and everything, suddenly you haven't got that, so it can be really daunting. So I'd say first of all that would be a pitfall. Secondly, I see a lot of kind of the focus on providing for different generations. So, for example, a lot of people really want to make sure they've got money for the children to go to university or later in life, more so than other communities, or even supporting, older generations. But I think really making sure that you are prioritising yourself first. Going through a divorce, you're going from 2 incomes to 1. Suddenly you've got less money than you're used to. So making sure that you're okay yourself before you kind of make provisions for others. It's really hard to get your head around, because I know, I understand a lot of the time that's what your focus is, that's what your goals are, but it's all about balance, and you need to make sure you're okay first.
Absolutely. I think that is kind of a tricky concept to get your head around, to think about yourself first and then the other members of your family. Thanks, Jodie. And you've already kind of touched on this, my next question. It's also kind of a question for myself, which is, what is the best way to attain financial literacy?
It's hard because these days there's a lot out there, right? Everyone's put everything on the internet, but I'd say also there's a lot of wrong advice out there. I think, like the others have said, seeking expert help, sitting down and understanding what there is, don't feel afraid to ask questions. I think money's, a lot of the time, it's a taboo subject, but even friends and family, speak about it. To help understand, you can look up definitions of things, but speak to advisors and, say, can you explain how a pension works? Can you explain, even going into the bank and general help with budgeting? It's just, making sure you're putting yourself out there to understand, really.
Yeah, definitely. And I just want to add to that. No question is a dumb question.
Yeah, no question is a silly question, because unfortunately there's not enough done for, like, in financial education. We learn so much at schools about things we'll never use again. But people don't teach you, what's an ISA, or how does a pension work? And I get people come to me in their mid-60s and they still don't really know. They're planning to retire, but they don't understand their pensions. So it's something you have to make an effort to do.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Jodie, the things you said kind of reflect my next sort of section I wanted to go on to, which is the Domestic Abuse Awareness Month, which is October. So we are now in October. What question to all of you? What types of abuse do you see amongst the Asian community? For instance, perhaps when it comes to the dowry or marital gold. Maybe quick fire answers here. Sarah, would you like to start?
So it's a bit of a nuance or a bit of an odd one, but sometimes it's parents taking the gold or taking the dowry from the wife. So that's been provided to her, but she doesn't have access to it. Now, when we're looking at a divorce, it's in her name and it's there, but she actually doesn't have it. As Sangeeta said, sometimes it's abroad, it's overseas, it's in a locker somewhere in a bank. It's hers and she should use it to be able to look after herself, but it's essentially abuse from her parents, financial abuse. She's not got access to that and they've taken it from her.
Definitely. Do you see that as a trend that you've been seeing recently in terms of the dynamic between parent and child?
I think less so now. I think, as Jodie said, information has become so widespread now and easy to get, and people are becoming so much more empowered, especially women in our communities are becoming so much more empowered to understand what their rights are and to seek legal support and assistance and to be confident in saying, well, this is mine and it should be mine and I want access to it. It's still there, it's still prevalent in some places, but we are seeing less of it, which is a good thing.
Great. It all comes down to empowerment and speaking up for yourself and going to the people that can help you, and which is why we have a trusted network. Sangeeta, same question for you. What are your thoughts?
I think another thing that crops up quite a lot in the Asian community is businesses, and that picks up on what Jodie said. Oftentimes it tends to be the husband who has dealt with the family business, knows where all the money is, has controlled everything, has drip fed money to wife throughout the marriage, and then it comes to a point where actually you realise that it's financial control in a way of how he's been drip feeding it. And then when it comes to a divorce situation, unfortunately, oftentimes the husband will then just cut the wife off entirely, and she's left in a situation where she's got minimal funds to look after herself and no sort of direct access to the matrimonial family funds, which are all generated through the business. And that one does pop up quite a lot.
For sure, thank you. And Jodie, same question for you.
Yeah, I think what Sangeeta's just touched on there, the financial abuses, in a lot of the time, the woman might have had like an amount that's transferred to them every day, so they don't hold the main assets, and that financial control is something that's really common. But the other thing I would say is, what I see a lot is when husband and wife have agreed, X amount is earmarked for children, for their university, for their education, or whatever it may be, and then comes to the crux of the divorce, and then suddenly them not wanting to kind of earmark that money anymore, or being disagreements in actually having that money earmarked. So I think my advice there would be, any gifts or anything that you're wanting to make, always just document it. And any money whilst you're in the marriage that's earmarked for children, you've got things that you've got trust you can use, you've got children's accounts you can use, because often that then gets actually dissolved in the marriage, and then you might have one person then having to try to find the money that they want to earmark for the children, because as Sarah and Sangeeta will know, it's often quite hard through a divorce to have a case of a significant amount of money needed for children. So kind of having them clear intentions documented, I guess, during the marriage may help.
For sure. I think seeking financial provision on divorce is all about one big paper trail. So as you said, Jodie, documentation is key. And to end this episode, I just wanted to ask each of you, are there any concluding comments or thoughts you have that you'd like to share with us? Sarah, perhaps you could go first.
I think times are changing, culture is changing, everything is shifting, and people need to feel empowered, whether they're men or women, fathers, mothers, wives, husbands, to talk about their concerns, to seek advice, to ask trusted people in a trusted network, do I need to take advice at this point? Should I seek a financial advisor to look over everything now or later on? Do I need a solicitor at this point? So there's no shame around it. It's completely changing. And as I said, there's a real shift now whereby we're seeing more and more people empowered to ask these questions and to come forward for advice at the relevant time, because it can make a huge difference to you getting the outcome that you should get and deserved of getting, compared to kind of leaving with basically nothing.
Completely agree. And Sangeeta, how about you?
I think from following on from that, and sort of from a domestic abuse perspective as well, because as you said, it's Domestic Abuse Awareness Month, I think knowing that it's okay to speak out when you're in that situation is so important, because we tend to find that when clients come to us, they don't even realise that they've been in a domestic abusive relationship, because it's just the norm for them, and they think that that's just part of the culture, or it's just how marriage should be. And that's not to say that all relationships in the South Asian culture are like that. And like Sarah said, times are changing, but there does tend to be that sort of nuance of one party having a bit more control than the other. And I think knowing that it's okay to call that out as bad behaviour, and to know that it's okay to get some help in that sense. And if you need to get some support or go down any of the sort of legal routes of getting that support, or go into any of the charities who are able to help in those circumstances, just do so.
Great advice. And Jodie, how about you?
So yeah, to echo what everyone else has said, just talk. You're not alone. As soon as you open up and talk, there'll be someone else feeling the same. And sometimes when you say it out loud, you realise, like Sangeeta said, it could be actually that you've been abused and haven't realised it. And then there's bigger steps to kind of take towards getting over that. I think a big one is prioritise yourself and financial well-being. There's so much pressures from families or friends or other people's opinions, but I think prioritising yourself and focusing on what your needs are. And then you're in a position to help other people, but until then you can't. I think making sure you understand the law, understand the facts and the law, rather than families' views or cultural beliefs. Actually, the law is what's going to have the biggest effect of how settlements work. And then, educate yourself. No question is a silly question. And then lastly, just be kind to yourself. It's such a big transition to go through. Take a day to feel sad, and don't put too much pressure on yourself to act like you're okay if you're not.
Thank you, Jodie. So thank you so much to our panel for answering my questions and providing those insights. I hope the listeners have learned something, and if anyone would like to know more about the work we do at ASPN or more about our panelists, please look us up on aspnnetwork.org.uk. We are also on Instagram at asp.network and LinkedIn at Asian Single Parents Network CIC. If you like this episode, please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. And don't forget to share it with anyone who might be interested. Thank you for listening.